tutorial video. This one is in conjunction with Tonic Showcase number 39, so if you want to check out my up close video, that will have been up yesterday if you want a full in-depth look at the die set and to see what three-dimensional project it creates. But obviously I love doing my card making, so for this corresponding tutorial, I'm not sure what to call this kind of technique. I'm sure I will have decided by the time I put the video up, but I remember doing this technique. I think I was doing an Arteza video, possibly with the watercolours in the tubes, and I'd left a background to dry overnight and a die cut had fallen from somewhere and landed on it. And when I woke up in the morning and came to, you know, finish doing the video, I was like, oh no, what's happened? But the result was really cool. And this result is where you have your like watercolory kind of background and then you put die cuts over the top and you get like this ghostly impression. And on this one as well, whilst the die cuts were in position, I also put some Nuvo shimmer powder over the top, so you kind of get ghostly impressions that are just the aqua flows, and then you've got the shimmer powder in the background as well. And the great thing about this kind of card is you have all of those extra acorns left over as well. So in this die set there are pumpkins, acorns, leaves that you can do this kind of technique with. So I've done the one with acorns already, and then I've got all of the leaves ready to show you the technique as well. Now for this technique I did all of the watercolouring on the card first and then put the die cuts on and then put the shimmer powder on, but I wanted to also show that you can wet your card first, put your die cuts on, add the colour on top with a bit of shimmer powder as well if you want to, but when you do this you get some partial white patterns as well. Rather than them all just being ghostly coloured patterns, you'll get some white patterns too. So this tutorial might be a little bit disjointed because I'm going to have to wait for this one to dry to be able to show you what it looks like. But I wanted to show you this kind of technique anyway because I thought it's a really, really cool one. I have used some extra gems and stuff from my stash to finish off this card too. So some of these bits aren't Tonic, but I've used some of their little, what are they called? Golden Acer leaves, the little confettis that came out in the Harvest Moon colour trend, and I've also used some gilding flakes in the background as well, just to add to that scattery kind of effect on there, and I've used a couple of their small sentiment dies as well to finish those two off. So first things first with the with this technique is I'm going to work on the Easy Clean Matte from Tonic, which I just put on a piece of acetate so that I can move this out the way, film my up close video and then come back to this one when it's dry. So what I'm going to do for this version is, how many die cuts have I got? I think I've got I've got 9. I thought I had 12. I've got 9 leaf die cuts. You could definitely do this with a mixture of the leaves and the acorns as well. I didn't use the pumpkin because I know I love pumpkins because my little doggie's called Pumpkin, but it hasn't got any detailed areas that cut out. It has debossing areas instead, so I wasn't sure if it would be as effective as having the ones with the detail cut into them. So first of all, I want to spray this with, I'm going to spray a little bit of water underneath to help keep my card flatter, and then I'm just going to spray the whole piece of card with water just to get it nice and wet, because the surface tension of the water will hold these die cuts into position whilst we add the inky colour onto there as well. So we're going to press them into place, really sort of squishing them into the water that we've put onto there. It doesn't matter if we touch anywhere because it's just water at this stage. When you're doing the other version where you put the colour down first, you kind of don't want to keep pressing it because there's colour all over it and you're going to colour your fingers. But for this one, we can press them as much as we like because it is just water on our cardstock. And the water is going to help sort of hold them down temporarily whilst we do the background, and then they'll all just pop off when it's dry. So let's just put, I think I will go with all 9 of them down the card. I'm just sort of nestling them into each other, trying to not put 2 in the same orientation right next to each other. And then, which way up should this one go? Maybe like that. The good thing about the water version as well, you can move them if you don't quite like the position you've put them in. Now some of the, obviously the card has soaked up some of that water, so we can add a bit more water onto there to make sure it's nice and wet still. And then we can come in with some aqua flows. You can obviously use any kind of watercolours that you have, but going with Tonic products. I know they don't sell aqua flows anymore, but you've probably got some in your stash. So for the previous card I went with the baked cherry, spiced ginger and the grenadine red, but for this one I want to go with a few more green tones, so I'm going to go with a couple of greens first, which is sliced kiwi and pressed olive. Now a lot of mine are running out of ink in them. They have got a little bit left, but you know when you squeeze them not much comes out now because they're running out. But if you want to make your aqua flows go further, maybe you've got lots that you got before they stopped selling them, you can dilute them when they get down to like maybe a third left. You can dilute them with some distilled water and they'll go on for a bit longer as well. So I'm just going to go with quite a bit of this lighter sliced kiwi kind of a colour. And actually the good thing about having the background wet already, it's kind of dragging more of that colour out of the pen, which is nice. And then a little bit of the pressed olive as well, to add some more green tones into here. And you want to make sure you get in between all of that detail, and you want to make sure you try and get as much on top of the die cuts as well, so that you've got that beautiful coloured die cuts to use afterwards, and they'll have like mottled variation in their colour too, which is nice. So let's go a bit more green on the top of some of these die cuts, and then we'll bring in, let's go with some of that spiced ginger because that's a really bright kind of orangey colour, and just add a little, obviously we're going to get a little bit of brown mixing orange and green together, but obviously leaves, they go brown, so it doesn't really matter when you're doing this kind of a background with leafy foliagey kind of designs. So a little bit of that, what was it called, spiced ginger, and then a bit of grenadine red. I think we'll just stick to these sort of slightly brighter toned kind of colours. Oh, that was a big blob that came out. It's really nice adding that splash of red into this kind of a colour scheme, so we can actually make that more concentrated. We can leave those red areas more concentrated and we can see what that kind of looks like in there. And then you can go one step further and add some Nuvo shimmer powder as well, and I went for Golden Sparkler because I thought it went really nicely with an autumnal kind of theme. I can't remember which colour trend it came out in, but it could have been the Harvest Moon one. And then we're just going to sprinkle some of this over the top, and again, you're going to get it on those leaves so that when we have the separate leaves later, they'll have a beautiful sparkle to them, but it's also going to go into the background as well. So we just tap a little bit of that all over, and then we'll do one final spritz of water just to activate any of that shimmer powder that, you know, didn't quite touch enough water to make it sort of burst into action. And you can see if there's any places you want to add a little bit more as well. Okay, so now we have to be really patient and let that dry. So definitely leave it on a level surface. Obviously, if you're just crafting for the sake of crafting as a normal person, you can just leave this overnight and then come back to it in the morning, it'd be perfect. But I'm going to go and film my up close video, which you will have seen yesterday, and then I'll come back and show you what this looks like. So I will see you in a couple of seconds. Okay, so you will have just seen me force dry this a little bit. I had left it for a couple of hours, but it was still a little bit damp when I came back to film the last bit of this, so I decided to just force dry it a little bit with my heat tool, and you could see how all of the leaves just kind of flew off as I was drying it. So I wanted to show you the differences between putting the die cuts onto the already colourful watercoloury kind of background, or just onto the wet white card and then putting the colour on top. You can see you get a slightly different effect. You get more lighter patches with the one that you put them onto the white card compared to putting them straight onto the sort of aquaflowy watercoloury background. So there is a slight little difference, and obviously because I've put the Nuvo shimmer powder on there, you also get the sort of ghosting kind of effect with the shimmer powders sort of showing in the details, and then all of the main leaf designs sort of being more flat because they haven't got the shimmer powder on them. So I think I'm going to call this technique a die cut resist, maybe, because it's kind of like resisting the watercolour sort of, because it's sort of sucking them up and you know, changing them to be a different colour because they suck it up all the way through them. So you could use these on a 3-dimensional project because they'd be coloured on both sides. But what I want to do is take that gorgeous thank you die that I was showing you earlier, and I think for this card I'm literally just going to put the thank you on there like I did with the happy birthday on this one, and finish that card like that, because I feel like this was in this area was a little bit less defined. This one is really nice and defined, so I feel like a smaller sentiment worked nicely on that. So that's how I'm going to finish off that card. And then for the other card, using all of the leaves, I wanted to do a landscape card this time. So the previous one was the portrait version, and I also want to do a Dymo label on it. So I've written autumnal birthday wishes as my sentiment. And then I think what I'm going to do is just have them sort of coming out from the middle of the card. Sort of like bursting out like this maybe, and then having that sentiment running across the centre of them. We could just go with maybe, how many should we go with? That's 7. If we go with 5, we'd have 4 for another project as well. I don't know, I think I prefer the random look actually when they're all up different directions. So maybe we'll do it but more focused down a smaller central area like this, and lay them in this kind of fashion perhaps. So they're kind of going in a diagonal across the card like that. So I think I'm going to lay them out like that, but I also wanted to show you how I did the little bits of gilding flake in the background as well. So first of all, I'm going to take a photo so I know the placement, because I like how I've laid those out. I'll leave those 2 out of the way, and then we can move all of these off so we kind of know which one was where. And to do the gilding flakes, I just did it really randomly, but all you do is you just take your glue and then you just put a few blobs in the sort of directions that you want them to be, and then you just dab them out a little bit just to make it a little bit tacky. You could do this with a flake and glitter glue as well if you'd rather, but just normal regular adhesive that you would use works really nicely as well. And then just take some of your radiant gold gilding flakes and just add some to those little dots of glue, and it kind of holds the flakes in random shapes as well. You're not just going to get little dots because we also pushed the little dots of glue around with our finger as well. We should just get little random flakes of gilding flakes sticking onto the background. It just gives like a difference in the background as well. I mean, it does kind of make the card a little bit less clean and simple looking, but you could definitely just leave it just with the leaves if you want to as well, because I really like the look of that too. So we can take off the excess, and then I often like to use one of these little brushes from Nuvo. And you can kind of burnish them in a little bit and just get off any of that excess. And if you have excess on your desk as well, these like dry dusting cloths are fantastic for that. I think this is a Pledge one, but I've had the box for years and it lasts ages because you can just keep cutting little bits off of the same cloth and using them again. So I might as well show you how I'm going to finish this one off. So I'm literally just going to take those leaves. I'm following the photograph that I took on my phone, so I know where I had them arranged, and I'm just going to stick these across the card to create that gorgeous like diagonal cascade of leaves. So I'll speed this bit up. Okay, so now we've got all of those stuck into position, we're just going to do the usual thing, flip it over, cut off any overhanging die cuts, and then we'll have our second sort of version of the card. So kind of like the main card you're making is this one, but in the process of making this one you get all of those beautiful die cuts that you can use on a card. So I'm just going to trim off the ends of this Dymo so it's not quite so long, and I think I'm just going to stick it flat onto the card actually. I do like to use a little bit of extra adhesive because obviously these days you can't really buy genuine Dymo label tape, especially not for the vintage one that I've got that does the narrower tape. So this is like a, you know, a cheaper version. It doesn't always stick brilliantly. Weirdly enough, the Dymo tape that I have that's like 20 years old or more, probably older than me, more than like 30 years old, it actually sticks better than some of the stuff that I've bought recently. It's really weird how adhesive works like that. But anyway, there is our extra finished card, and then all I'll do for this one is just double stack that sentiment, stick it on, put them both on card blanks, and then we've got two different versions from the previous cards that I made with the same technique as well. So I really hope you enjoyed this technique for a tutorial video. I think I am going to call it something like a die cut resist, because it does kind of look like an embossed resist kind of design, where, you know, that you've got the shimmer powder in the other places but the main image is still looking the same. So a cool different idea that you might not have seen before, different way of using your die cuts that you have, a nice like bonus extra card. If you're making your box and you're die cutting all the panel pieces for it, why don't you chuck on an extra acorn and leaf and maybe even a pumpkin die, cut them all out, and then you've got enough to make a couple of different cards. You can stick with the same design on each card, or you could have done a leafy background, an acorn background, but mixed up the leaves and the acorns when you put them onto these cards as well. You could do just like 3 simple ones, you know, to make them last longer for another card. You can use up any of the little excess pieces that we chopped off to make a different piece for another card as well. Maybe you've got a square die cut or something that you've got left over from something else. You could, you know, use those leftover pieces just to put on a small little square and then mount that onto your card as well. So many different ways of doing this kind of technique, using it for different things as well. It doesn't have to just be the small die cuts. I do it with the small die cuts because that was like the serendipitous way it kind of happened. It was a smaller die cut that fell on my background, and that's how I realised that this technique kind of works. But you can definitely do it with a full background die as well. Just make sure all of the areas are touching the card, so you're going to get the pattern all over. It is kind of easier to get all of the areas to touch when it's a smaller die cut, but you can definitely experiment with different die cuts that you've got as well. So I really hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget, if you want an up-close look at exactly what this die set creates, the Showcase 39, which is the Thankful Harvest gift box, then do check out my up-close video from yesterday. And if you want to get hold of this die set, then there are affiliate links in the description box below the video and on my blog post as well. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again in the next video. Bye!